Well, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, August the 23rd at approximately 7:30 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Williams, Pippin, Graziano,
Here.
O'Laughlin,
Here.
Kretschmer,
Here.
Jasper, Corey.
Here. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'll begin by expressing our thanks to the Knowlton family for their patience. As you'll recall, our last meeting, we did not have a quorum. We do this evening. And we will get to the application in just a brief moment. But just to help you understand the process, the way we have typically done this is Mr. Simmons gives us an overview of the request. And then if you like, you're welcome to approach the podium when we get to the application and give us any additional comments you'd like to make. Some of the members of the ZPA may have questions for yourself or Mr. Simmons. And then when we close that portion of the meeting, I'm required to open it up to public. This does get recorded on YouTube as part of the Open Meetings Act, so be aware of that. So when you approach, if you choose to speak, please state your name and your address for the record. That's kind of the process. And then we do open it up to the public. I know there's just the three of you in the audience. And then we close that portion. The ZPA may have some questions amongst themselves. We take a vote. And then, as Mr. Simmons was saying, that gets delivered back to our elected officials. So that's the process. And just allow me to do a couple of housekeeping items here, and then we'll begin. So, gentlemen, as you know, we were unable to move forward with our meeting from August the 9th, but you still should have your agenda from August the 9th. And I should say publicly thank you to Mr. Graziano, who filled in for me back in June when I was away. So thank you very much, Mr. Graziano. And the first order of business is to approve the meeting minutes of July the 26th. 2018. And does everyone have their meeting minutes in their package in front of them? And does anyone have any questions or comments about the meeting or minutes? Hearing none, then on a voice vote, those in favor of approving the minutes of July the 26th, 2018, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. So, gentlemen, we have two cases tonight. The first one will involve Amy and Justin Knowlton. This is ZPA case 07002. It's a variance to reduce the side yard setback for an accessory structure, and this falls into section 17.20.040 of the code, and the location is 52 Hampton Street. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As identified on the slide, the case is for 52 Hampton Street. The petitioners are seeking a variance related to an in-ground pool that is installed on the property. There's a bit of a history with the pool, which I'll get into in the presentation, but they're seeking a variance to reduce the side yard setback from 8 feet to 4 feet. This slide here shows the location of the pool. As you can see on the blow-up, the existing setback from the side yard where the fence is located is roughly 4 feet. There's a 6-foot utility easement that's located there, but the variance is requested for an existing in-ground pool that was constructed back in the late 90s, but was not done in compliance with the village ordinances. Little history on the request. Back in June 1998, a permit was issued for the construction of the pool. And the village issued a stop work order in July of that year as the pool was not being constructed in accordance to the plans. There were 2 violations that were noted in that notice, which I believe is summarized in the staff report. There was a safety barrier that was not being provided around the pool, and also the pool was not compliant with the side yard setback. During the response to that, the safety barrier was installed where a fence was installed around the property that limited access to the swimming area. But staff never was able to find history of a variance ever being a petition being submitted for a variance to bring the pool into compliance. There was no additional history in the file other than the notice that was provided indicating that the pool was not in compliance with code, so but it was allowed to remain after that time period. The current petitioners contacted the village in 2015 as they're looking to purchase the property. They were notified at that time of the outstanding violation. due to the time period of when the violation existed on the property to when they purchased the site, staff advised that we would allow the existing condition to remain as is, similar to a non-conforming structure, but that any future improvements to the property would require the property be brought into compliance, either through the seeking of a variance or potential removal of the structure. In this instance, the petitioners have purchased the property and they're now seeking to bring the property in compliance with code by applying for the variance to reduce the side yard setback, which is existing on the site. This slide summarizes the standards that are found within the zoning ordinance as far as for the consideration of a variation. Summaries the relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality, is harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations, and that the applicant has not taken any action that has caused the extraordinary condition and made it substantially worse than otherwise might have been. While the existence of a zoning violation in itself does not justify the need for a variance, the petitioners in this case had no physical action in creating the condition. It was an existing condition when they purchased the property. It has been in existence for nearly 2 decades, so it will not alter the character of the locality. The variation that's being requested in general is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the code and the fact that there will be a setback maintained along the property line, but there's other properties in the vicinity that do have in-ground pools and improvements of that manner installed. The rest of the property will comply with other zoning regulations as far as lot coverage and other setback requirements as well. So with that analysis and review of the case, staff is recommending this evening that if the ZPA believes that the standards are met in this case, the ZPA should recommend approval of the following motion. Approval of variance to reduce the required interior side yard setback for an accessory in-ground pool and patio structure from 8 feet to 4 feet for the property located at 52 Hampton Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons? Mr. Graziano.
Just not trying to be nitpicky or anything, but is a shed considered an accessory structure?
Yes, it would be.
There appears to be a shed in the southwest corner of the property that's only 3-point-something feet off the property.
That would be considered a non-conforming structure. If we want to approve a variance for that shed as well, we could grant that, but as of right now, I would consider that structure to be non-conforming. I don't know.
Which only means that if it burns down, they have to rebuild it.
And it would have to comply with the required
Then they have-
setback of 8 feet.
Okay. So our variance is only for the pool and that, and we'll just leave the shed to be and,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, I couldn't find permanent history
Works
for
for
the
me.
shed.
All right. That's a good question, Mr. Graziano. Gentlemen, other questions?
My one was already answered earlier, but did a Google map over the region, but along with that, Brian, do you know how many of these we've allowed and how many are probably just put in without our knowledge?
As far as pools put in? I couldn't answer the question specifically.
Because I'm just, and the Google map distance, the ruler, isn't really accurate, but it looks to me as though the pool directly across the street is about 5 feet off to 6 feet off the sideline.
Okay. I don't know when that pool was installed.
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's not, this is not of the ordinary for the neighborhood, from what I could tell. There's also, when you showed the big picture, it's probably an above-ground pool, but it also looks to be about 4 foot off the sideline, too.
Those are other conditions we can look at. I don't know when they were installed.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying let's go after these folks. I'm
I
just
understand.
saying,
Yeah.
kind of fits in with the nature of what's going on in that whole neighborhood.
Understood.
Mr. O'Loughlin, just to be transparent in the process, do you want to articulate the question that you would answer before we went on the record, just so that everyone's getting a full view of the question that you asked?
Oh, before.
Yes.
What was my question before?
When you came in and you were asking Mr. Simmons, this has been an existing situation.
Oh, yes, yeah, I just said this is an existing situation and wasn't quite understanding why we were approving it at this point, but you made it clear that this was due to these folks wanting to bring their property into compliance, which is great, as well as just setting standards that would say, hey, if we need to change anything in the future, it'll be taken into consideration.
Absolutely.
Correct.
But after
Yeah.
20 years of being in one place, I can't see any reason not to just approve. I'm not going to make you pull out your patio, or at least my suggestion. My vote doesn't count for much, but
Right. Yeah, it's, even though the petitioners were not owners of the property when this violation basically was put in place, by acquiring the property, they do acquire all the existing conditions and are responsible for those conditions as well. So the violation would have transferred to them in that regard. And this variation is just seeking a way to bring the property in compliance with code.
no, and I understood that.
Right.
So any other questions, gentlemen? Okay, so to the petitioner, do you have anything further that you would like to add to the application or the request? Okay, thank you very much. And at this time, I'll open up to the public, and for the record, there are 3 members of the audience. I believe they're all related to the Knowlton family, perhaps. Yeah, and I just want to double check if anyone has any questions or comments from the audience. So at this time, I'll close the public. Oh, well, welcome. Yeah.
And that was my next question. So.
So just want to be clear that there are no questions from the audience. So we'll close that portion of the meeting. Gentlemen, before I call the vote, does anyone have any additional questions on the petition?
Well, you have one of your neighbors here, but I was going to ask, did you get any negative comments from any of your other neighbors? Or they've seen it for 20 years and don't really... Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. O'Laughlin. Any other questions? Okay, at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a variance to reduce the required interior setback of the setback for an accessory in-ground pool and patio structure from 8 feet to 4 feet for the property located at 52 Hampton Street.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any comments or questions on the motion? Okay, at this time, Mr. Simmons, would you please call the roll?
Graziano?
Yes.
O'Laughlin?
Yes.
Kretschmer?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes. So to the Knowlton family, you have a favorable recommendation, and I want to say publicly, thank you very much for your patience with us. I know you were here a couple of weeks ago, and we couldn't bring this to the floor because we didn't have a quorum, so thank you very much for your understanding. We'll wish you every success. My suggestion would be to stay in close contact with Mr. Simmons. He'll help take you through the rest of the process. That does go before our elected officials, and they'll give their final instructions on your request. And Mr. Simmons, I don't know if you would know tonight when that meeting will occur.
That would be September 4th, the first Tuesday of the month.
Very good. Okay, so we'll wish you every success with everything. Thank you again for your patience. Yeah, you're welcome to stay. We have one more piece of business, and if you need to go somewhere else, we'll understand. But thank you again. Okay, gentlemen, so we have one other piece of business tonight. This is going to be Village Case Number ZPA 07003. This is on behalf of the Village of Cary. This is a temporary 180-day moratorium of telecommunication towers and antennas. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. The request this evening is for discussion regarding a 180-day moratorium for telecommunication towers and antenna. The slide here, you can see 3 different examples of ones that are either within the village or directly outside the village. But the purpose of the moratorium is to give the village an opportunity to revise codes that would specifically speak towards the installation of these devices or uses within the village. As the ZPA is aware, we had a zoning petition that went through the process within the past year that was considered by both the zoning board and village board. And based off that discussion and review of that project, the village board thought that there would be an opportunity to review our existing codes outside of the UDO process to develop regulations specifically for this land use. Basically, the moratorium notifies the general public that the village is in the process of drafting regulations for these devices so that it will kind of restrict new applications from coming in for the installation of the towers, but indicates that we are in the process of drafting regulations that will specifically speak towards that use, so they can be aware of when those regulations come online, what those new regulations would be. So from a legal perspective, the process requires a recommendation from the ZPA during a public hearing, which we're having this evening, and that would then be decided on by the village board, and if recommended for approval from this committee and then approved by the village board, the 180-day moratorium would take effect the date of the village board's approval. I did it. So some existing requirements, our existing code allows towers under 35 feet by right in certain business districts and manufacturing districts. Towers that are over 35 feet in height require conditional use approval within those same zoning districts. Our code right now is, aside from those specific regulations, provides no additional direction towards the towers besides the bulk standards for each district. The moratorium, again, is to provide time to draft appropriate regulations, provide notice to the development community that the village is revising these regulations for these structures, and separate from the UDO process. But we do have regulations as part of the UDO that we have drafted towards this. So if the UDO is not adopted within the 6-month time period, we would likely adopt some of the recommendations from the UDO separately. But I would envision that both are going to be going hand in hand, and the 180 days may be half that time period or less, where we are at in the UDO process. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the proposal for the moratorium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Questions for Mr. Simmons, gentlemen?
My only question is your under 35-foot poles that are allowable by right, does that put a moratorium on them as well?
Yes, it does.
So nothing can be built no matter what?
Correct. There's two separate regulations. Basically, our code limits telecommunications towers or allows them both by right under 35 feet and permissible by conditional use permit over 35 feet.
Correct.
As I mentioned before the meeting, the state has recently passed regulations for small cell installations that can be installed on village utility poles. That would not be under the moratorium as the state requirement.
Is the state requirement?
Correct. And we're currently working with our attorneys to draft language related to that as far as those small cell sites. But other uses that are specifically proposed on equipment either 35 feet below or above would be restricted if they don't fall under that specific state requirement.
Okay, gotcha.
I guess I'm just confused as to why we need a text amendment if this is a temporary ordinance or whatever that's going into effect.
Sure. This proposed as a text amendment is that the moratorium is restricting the use of these structures, and eventually will come back to this board as a text amendment. So it's referring to those standards in the ordinance that eventually the code will come, changes to the zoning ordinance will come back to you as a text amendment. So
Yeah, I understand that part, that,
Right.
they're going to come up with something and we're going to go in and change the code to do that.
Correct. So there's no proposal this evening for a text amendment. I put the standards in the staff report that show that those would be the conditions that would need to be met.
So this is future. We're not,
Correct.
we're not going to change, we're not changing the book right now.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
So this is just you're putting a 6-month restriction on future
Okay,
applications.
that part I understood.
Gotcha. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, I get confused enough without,
Was there any other questions? Mr.
no,
Simmons?
that was it.
Mr. Krishman?
I understand what we're doing.
No, I'm glad you're asking questions. It's important. So at this time, I'll open up to the audience. Do you have any questions that you would like to address around this issue? Okay, at this time, we'll close the public portion of our meeting. So gentlemen, before I call the motion, any other comments or questions? All right. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a temporary 180-day moratorium on the issuance of any conditional use permits or other authorizations related to any applications for zoning or rezoning approved of freestanding telecommunication or microwave relay towers under the zoning code of the Village of Cary.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any other questions or comments on the motion?
So the way that this is worded, this is a moratorium on conditional uses and those that could be constructed by right with a permit.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So at this time, Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
O'Laughlin,
Yes.
Kretschmer,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So Brian, we'll leave this with you. I'm assuming this will go forward also on September the 4th?
Correct. That's
Okay. So gentlemen, before I close the meeting, were there any other items that you wanted to bring forward before we close? All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you very much, everyone. And good luck, and thank you again.
Thank you.